The hallways of Westlake High School buzzed with the usual Monday morning chaos. Locker doors slammed, sneakers squeaked against polished floors, and teenage voices echoed off walls covered in college pennants and sports trophies. Amid this familiar symphony of school sounds, something different caught everyone's attention. The steady tap-tap-tap of a white cane. Lynn moved carefully through the corridor, her right hand gripping the handle of her cane, while her left clutched the strap of her backpack. She'd practiced this route twice already, once on Friday afternoon when her mom had brought her in to meet the principal, and again early this morning before other students arrived. 23 steps from the main entrance, then turn right. 17 more steps to the administrative office where she needed to pick up her class schedule. "Mom, I can do this," Lynn had insisted that morning, feeling her mother hovering beside the car. "You can't walk me to class on my first day. I'm 15, not 5. Now navigating the crowded hallway alone, Lynn wasn't quite as confident as she'd pretended to be. The school she'd transferred from had been smaller, the layout simpler. Here everything felt vast and unpredictable, but she kept her chin up and her face neutral, determined not to show any trace of uncertainty. "Watch where you're going," a voice snapped as Lynn's cane tapped against someone's shoe. "Sorry," she murmured, adjusting her path slightly. The comment was followed by whispers and a few poorly concealed snickers. Lynn pretended not to hear, though her ears, sharper than most people's, caught every word. "That's the new girl. Is she really blind?" "Must be. Look at those weird eyes. How's she even going to manage here?" Lynn had been born without sight. She couldn't miss what she'd never had, she often told people. But sometimes she wished she could see the faces that matched the voices around her, especially when those voices dropped to whispers just after she passed. The administrative office smelled of coffee and printer paper. Lynn recognized Mrs. Powell, the secretary she'd met on Friday, by her gentle voice and the faint scent of vanilla perfume. "Good morning, Lynn. Right on time. I've got your schedule here, printed in Braille just like you requested. Would you like me to walk you to your first class?" "No, thank you," Lynn said politely. "I've got it." Her fingers skimmed over the raised dots of her schedule. First period, World History, Room 112. She had memorized the school map as best she could. Room 112 would be down the main hallway, first corridor on the right. As Lynn stepped back into the hall, the warning bell rang, and the crowd's movement became more urgent. Someone bumped into her hard enough to make her stumble. "Oops, sorry," a girl's voice said, not sounding sorry at all. "Didn't see you there." This was followed by a burst of laughter from several people. "That's ironic, Brittany," a boy's voice added, louder than necessary. "She's the one who can't see." More laughter. Lynn tightened her grip on her cane and kept moving. She'd dealt with this before, the awkwardness, the jokes, the exaggerated sympathy, or occasionally the cruelty. New school, same story. Lynn found room 112 just as the final bell rang. She stood in the doorway, aware that conversation was dying as students noticed her. "Ah, you must be Lynn Wong," a man's voice said warmly. "I'm Mr. Harmon. Welcome to World History. There's an empty desk in the second row, third from the left. Thomas, could you raise your hand to guide our new student?" She can't see my hand, Mr. Harmon," a voice pointed out, triggering scattered laughter. Mr. Harmon cleared his throat. "Thomas, please say over here so Lynn can follow your voice." "Over here," a bored voice called out. Lynn made her way to the empty desk, counting steps and using her cane to avoid obstacles. She could feel every eye in the room on her, hear the whispers, sense the stares. As she sat down, someone from behind leaned forward. "So, can you, see anything at all? Or is everything just black?" a girl whispered. Lynn had answered this question hundreds of times. "I've never seen anything, so I don't really know what black looks like," she replied quietly. "I just don't see." "Weird," the girl muttered, leaning back. Mr. Harmon began his lecture on ancient civilizations, and Lynn pulled out her laptop with its screen reader and braille display. As her fingers moved across the keys, taking notes, she heard the same girl behind her mimicking the sound to her friends, followed by muffled giggles. By lunchtime, Lynn had survived 4 classes and was mentally exhausted. The cafeteria presented a new challenge, a large, echoing space full of moving bodies and no clear path. She stood at the entrance, trying to orient herself by sound. "You look lost," said a voice beside her, gentler than any she'd heard so far today. "I'm Raj. Want to sit with me and my friends? Before Lynn could answer, another voice cut in. She's sitting with us, Raj. Back off. The new voice belonged to a girl who took Lynn's elbow without asking. I'm Brittany. You're coming with me. Something in Brittany's tone made Lynn uneasy, but she allowed herself to be guided through the cafeteria, her cane tapping along beside her. The noise level dropped noticeably as they passed certain tables, and Lynn sensed they were being watched. Everyone, Brittany announced loudly. This is Lynn. She's blind, in case you couldn't tell. Laughter rippled around what Lynn assumed was a table. She was guided to a seat and someone set a tray in front of her. Thanks, Lynn said cautiously. What's on the menu today? Mystery meat, probably, a boy's voice said. I'm Tyler, basketball team captain and Brittany's boyfriend. So you really can't see anything, huh? That's usually what blind means, Lynn replied, trying to keep her tone light. She reached forward carefully, mapping the tray with her fingertips. Sandwiched to the left, something that felt like an apple; to the right, a carton that was probably milk in the corner. So how do you do stuff? Another girl asked. Like how do you pick out clothes or put on makeup? Lynn had her standard answers ready. My clothes have braille labels that tell me the color and style. And I don't really wear makeup much. That explains a lot, someone muttered, triggering more laughter. Lynn bit into her sandwich, pretending she hadn't heard. The conversation continued around her, with occasional questions thrown her way that seemed designed more for the group's entertainment than genuine interest. Every answer she gave was met with exaggerated responses of amazement or barely concealed mockery. Can you cross the street by yourself? How do you know if your hair looks good? Do you dream with pictures? If you've never seen color, what do you think red is like? Lynn answered each question patiently, though her appetite had disappeared. She'd hoped that high school students might be more mature than the kids at her old school. Apparently not. When lunch finally ended, Brittany offered to show Lynn to her next class, music appreciation with Ms. Rivera. The gesture seemed friendly enough, but as they walked, Brittany's grip on Lynn's arm tightened. Let me give you some advice, Brittany said, voice dropping. Westlake has a certain order to things. Some people matter and some don't. If you stick with me, you might be okay. Just don't get any ideas about trying to be special or getting attention because of your situation. Lynn pulled her arm free. Thanks for lunch, she said neutrally. But I can find my own way from here. Brittany laughed. Good luck with that. Her footsteps retreated down the hall. Lynn stood still for a moment, collecting herself. The hallway was emptying as students hurried to class. Using her cane and counting doorways, she made her way toward what she hoped was the music room. When her cane hit a set of double doors, she pushed one open and stepped inside. The acoustics immediately told her she was in a large room with high ceilings. The sounds of hallway chaos were muted here, replaced by a quiet stillness. Lynn took a few steps forward and her cane hit something solid. Careful there, a woman's voice said kindly. That's a very expensive piano you're about to bump into. I'm sorry, Lynn said quickly. I'm looking for Ms. Rivera's music appreciation class. You found it, the woman replied. I'm Ms. Rivera, and you must be Lynn Wong, our new student. You're actually early. The bell hasn't rung yet. Lynn felt some of her tension ease. I got lost, she admitted. Well, you found the right place, Ms. Rivera said. Do you play any instruments, Lynn? Lynn's fingers itched at the question. Piano, she said. I've played since I was 4. Really? Ms. Rivera's voice perked up with genuine interest. The piano you almost bumped into is our pride and joy. A baby grand donated by an alumnus last year. Would you like to try it? For the first time that day, Lynn felt a glimmer of excitement. Could I? Ms. Rivera guided her to the bench and Lynn set her cane aside, stretching her fingers toward the keyboard. The cool ivory keys felt like old friends under her fingertips. She played a simple scale, testing the piano's action and tone. Beautiful touch, Ms. Rivera observed. You've obviously had good training. Lynn was about to respond when the classroom door burst open and students began filing in. The comfortable bubble that had briefly formed around her popped as she recognized Brittany's voice among those entering. Oh my God, Brittany said loudly. Is blind girl trying to play the piano? This should be hilarious. Lynn's hands froze above the keys. She could hear Tyler and others from the lunch table joining in the laughter. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she kept her face turned toward the piano, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. Ms. Rivera cleared her throat sharply. Take your seats, everyone. Class is about to begin. As Lynn carefully rose from the piano bench, reaching for her cane, she felt Ms. Rivera's hand on her shoulder. "We have a special performance workshop on Thursdays after school," the teacher said quietly. "If you're interested in having some time with this piano without an audience, you'd be very welcome." Lynn nodded, a small smile forming despite the lingering sting of humiliation. "I'd like that," she whispered. Finding her assigned seat, Lynn settled in for her 5th class of the day. 7 more to go before she could escape to the sanctuary of home. But for the first time since arriving at Westlake High, she had something to look forward to. Thursday afternoon, when she could let her fingers do what they did best. When she could speak through music in ways words never allowed her to. When, just maybe, she could show these people who thought they knew everything about her, based on what she couldn't do, what she actually could. The piano would be waiting, and Lynn would be ready. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. For 3 days, Lynn endured the hallway comments, the not-so-accidental bumps, and Brittany's fake friendliness that always seemed to end with some kind of humiliation. But the promise of time alone with the piano kept her going. When the final bell rang on Thursday afternoon, Lynn waited for the stampede of students to clear before making her way to the music room. She'd spent the past 3 days carefully memorizing the route. Down the main hallway, left at the water fountain, 3rd door on the right. Her cane tapped rhythmically against the tiled floor, almost like a metronome keeping time with her quickening heartbeat. "You actually showed up," Ms. Rivera said as Lynn entered the music room. "I'm glad." The teacher's voice came from across the room near what Lynn assumed was her desk. The space felt different now, quieter, more peaceful, with none of the nervous energy that filled it during regular classes. "Is anyone else coming?" Lynn asked, still standing near the doorway. "No, just us," Ms. Rivera replied. "Thursday workshops are voluntary, and I'm afraid most students rush off to sports practice or video games." "Their loss, really." Lynn relaxed slightly, shoulders dropping from their defensive position. "So I can use the piano?" "It's all yours. Let me show you where everything is first." Ms. Rivera guided Lynn around the room, letting her touch and explore the space properly for the first time. Lynn's fingers traced the edges of music stands, brushed against the strings of a guitar hanging on the wall, and tapped lightly on a set of drums. "And here's our star," Ms. Rivera said finally, leading Lynn to the baby grand. A Yamaha GB1K, not the most expensive in the world, but a beautiful instrument. Lynn ran her hands over the smooth curves of the piano, feeling its polished surface and the slight texture change where the manufacturer's logo was embedded. Her fingers found the fallboard covering the keys. "May I?" she asked. "Please do." Lynn lifted the fallboard and felt the familiar pattern of black and white keys beneath her fingertips. She sat down on the bench, adjusting her position until it felt right. The piano was already perfectly tuned. She could tell from the resonance as she tested a few keys. "What do you like to play?" Ms. Rivera asked, pulling up a chair nearby. Lynn thought for a moment. "Classical mostly. Chopin, Debussy. But I also like film music and some modern stuff." "Play something for me," Ms. Rivera suggested. "Whatever comes to mind." Lynn took a deep breath and began playing Debussy's Clair de Lune. Her fingers moved delicately across the keys, finding each note with perfect precision. The music flowed from her hands as naturally as breathing. She didn't need sheet music, never had. Once she learned a piece, it stayed with her, locked in muscle memory and heart. As the final notes faded, Lynn heard Ms. Rivera exhale softly. "That was extraordinary," the teacher said. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 4, Lynn replied. "My parents got me a keyboard after I kept playing on a toy piano until the keys broke. My mom says I could play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star perfectly after hearing it just once." "You have a gift," Ms. Rivera said simply. "Have you ever performed publicly?" Lynn shook her head. "Just recitals at my old school and for family." "Nothing big?" Ms. Rivera seemed to be considering something. "Well, you're welcome to use this piano whenever you like after school. I'm usually here until 5, grading papers or organizing music sheets." Lynn's fingers still rested on the keys, not wanting to break contact. "Thank you. That means a lot. Play something else," Ms. Rivera encouraged. "Something you love." For the next hour, Lynn lost herself in music. She played pieces she'd learned years ago and ones she'd been working on recently. She even improvised a little, following melodies that formed in her mind. With each note, the stress of the past few days, the whispers, the mockery, The constant need to prove herself melted away. When Lynn finally stopped, her fingers slightly sore but her heart lighter than it had been all week, Ms. Rivera spoke again. "The winter talent show is coming up in 2 months," she said casually. "Students showcase all kinds of abilities: singing, dancing, comedy routines. The sign-up sheet goes up next week." Lynn's hand stilled on the keyboard. "Are you suggesting I should enter?" "I think you'd leave quite an impression," Ms. Rivera replied. "But it's entirely up to you. The thought of performing in front of the entire school, in front of Brittany and Tyler and all the others who had been making her life difficult, sent a wave of anxiety through Lynn's stomach. "I'll think about it," she said, non-committally. "Fair enough," Ms. Rivera said. "Same time next Thursday?" Lynn nodded. "I'll be here." For the next 3 weeks, Thursday afternoons became Lynn's sanctuary. Sometimes Ms. Rivera sat and listened. Other times she worked quietly at her desk, leaving Lynn alone with the piano. Occasionally, they talked about music theory or composers or the emotional quality of different pieces. What Lynn didn't tell Ms. Rivera was that she had also started coming to school early, slipping into the music room before first period when the building was still quiet. The janitor, Mr. Diaz, had caught her the first morning. "You're not supposed to be in classrooms before hours," he'd said. Lynn had stood frozen, one hand on the piano, the other clutching her cane. "I just wanted to play for a bit," she'd explained, "before everyone gets here." Mr. Diaz had been quiet for a moment. Then he'd sighed. "I start at 6:30. If you can get here by 7, I'll unlock the music room for you. But you didn't hear it from me, got it?" Now Lynn had both mornings and Thursday afternoons with the piano. It became her routine, her private world where she felt confident and capable. During these sessions, she began working on something new, a piece she was composing herself, something that expressed both her struggles and her determination. One morning in early November, as Lynn was deep in concentration, working through a difficult passage of her composition, she was startled by a voice from the doorway. "So this is where you hide." Lynn's hands jerked away from the keys as if burned. She recognized Tyler's voice immediately. "I'm not hiding," she said, reaching for her cane. "Just practicing." "Brittany said you were getting special treatment from Ms. Rivera," Tyler said, his footsteps coming closer. "Private lessons and stuff." "Not lessons," Lynn corrected, standing up. "I just play sometimes. Ms. Rivera lets me use the piano." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Lynn wished she could see his face, read his expression. His voice gave away little. "That sounded pretty good," he finally said, surprising her. "What was it?" Lynn hesitated. "Something I'm writing." "You write music too?" There was a note of genuine curiosity in his voice now. "I'm trying to," she admitted. "It's still rough." The warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. "Well, don't let me stop you," Tyler said. "See you in history." He left before Lynn could respond, the door closing behind him. She stood there, confused by the encounter. It was the first time Tyler had spoken to her without mockery or an audience of his friends. Later that day in the cafeteria, Lynn sat alone at a corner table, as had become her habit. She'd learned to navigate the lunch line independently, though it sometimes meant waiting until most students had been served. "Is this seat taken?" a voice asked. Raj, the boy who had offered to help her on the first day. "No, go ahead," Lynn replied, surprised. "Cool. Mind if my friend Zoe joins too?" "That's fine." 2 trays clattered onto the table and chairs scraped against the floor as Raj and his friend sat down. "So you play piano?" Raj asked without preamble. Lynn nearly choked on her water. "How did you—" "Tyler mentioned it in gym class," Zoe explained. Her voice was soft but direct. "Said you were in the music room this morning playing something original." Lynn's stomach tightened. Was he making fun of me? "Actually, no," Raj said thoughtfully. He seemed kind of impressed, which is weird for Tyler. "He's a jerk most of the time," Zoe added bluntly. "But he's actually into music. Plays guitar in some garage band." Lynn picked at her food, unsure how to respond. After a moment, she asked, "Are you guys friends with him and Brittany?" Raj snorted. "Hardly. They're the popular crowd. We're the— well, I guess you could say we're the invisibles." "Speak for yourself," Zoe laughed. "I prefer selectively social." "Zoe's in the art club," Raj explained to Lynn. "She makes these incredible sculptures out of recycled materials. And I'm the unofficial school tech support. If something has a circuit board, I can probably fix it." The conversation shifted easily from there, flowing naturally between topics. For the first time since arriving at Westlake, Lynn felt like she was having a normal lunch with potential friends. No one asked awkward questions about her blindness or treated her like an oddity. As lunch ended and they gathered their trays, Zoe asked, "Are you really writing your own music?" "Yeah," Lynn admitted. "It's something I've been working on for the talent show." The words slipped out before she realized what she was saying. She hadn't actually decided to enter the talent show yet, had she? "You're doing the talent show?" Raj sounded excited. "That's awesome." "I'm not sure yet," Lynn backtracked. "I'm still thinking about it." "Well, if you do," Zoe said, "you've got at least 2 people who'll cheer for you." The talent show sign-up sheet went up the following Monday. Lynn hesitated all day, alternating between determination and doubt. After her last class, she asked Ms. Rivera to guide her hand to the right spot on the paper. "Are you sure about this?" Ms. Rivera asked as Lynn's pen hovered over the sheet. No, Lynn thought. She wasn't sure at all. The talent show was a big deal at Westlake. Everybody attended, including parents and alumni. The thought of playing in front of all those people made her palms sweat. But something else had been growing alongside her fear. A small, persistent voice that wondered what it would be like to really be heard. To express herself through music to people who saw her as nothing more than the blind girl. "I'm sure," Lynn said, and signed her name. Word spread quickly that Lynn had signed up for the talent show. By the next morning, it seemed like the entire school knew. Lynn noticed the difference immediately. The hallways grew quieter when she walked through them, the whispers more urgent, the attention more focused. "They're posting the official lineup today," Raj told her during their shared English class. He had started sitting next to her, occasionally describing things the teacher wrote on the board that weren't in their textbooks. "How many people signed up?" Lynn asked, trying to sound casual despite the knot in her stomach. 23, but only 15 will get to perform. The committee picks based on the auditions next week." Lynn's fingers froze on her braille display. "Auditions? No one told me about auditions." Raj seemed surprised. "Yeah, they're always held 3 weeks before the show." "Didn't Ms. Rivera mention that?" Before Lynn could answer, their teacher called the class to order and the conversation ended. But the question lingered in Lynn's mind all morning. Auditions meant playing in front of the talent show committee, a group of teachers and senior students who would judge whether she was good enough to perform. By lunchtime, her anxiety had built to the point where she couldn't eat. She sat with Raj and Zoe, pushing food around her plate while they discussed their weekend plans. "You okay?" Zoe asked eventually. "You haven't said 2 words since you sat down." "I didn't know about the auditions," Lynn admitted. "I'm not sure I'm ready." "Your piece sounded amazing when I heard you practicing," Raj said encouragingly. "You heard me play?" Lynn was startled. "When?" "Last Thursday after school. I was dropping off some equipment in the AV room across from the music department. The door was partly open and I stopped to listen for a minute." "Or 10, Zoe teased. He was practically drooling. "I was not," Raj protested, but Lynn could hear the embarrassment in his voice. "I just thought it was really good, that's all." Lynn felt heat rising to her cheeks. "It's not finished yet, and I've never played it for anyone except Ms. Rivera." "Well, it already sounds incredible," Raj insisted. "Trust me, you'll get through the auditions no problem." Lynn wished she shared his confidence. The piece she was writing was deeply personal, a musical journey that reflected her experience of moving through darkness into moments of unexpected beauty. But it was complex and still rough in places. She'd need to practice intensely to have it performance-ready by the auditions. "When exactly are the auditions?" she asked. "Next Friday after school," Zoe replied. "In the auditorium, 9 days." Lynn had 9 days to perfect a piece that had been living mostly in her head and fingers for the past few weeks. That afternoon, instead of heading home on the bus, Lynn made her way to the music room. Ms. Rivera was surprised to see her. It wasn't their usual Thursday session. "I need more practice time," Lynn explained. "For the auditions?" "Ah, yes," Ms. Rivera sounded slightly guilty. "I should have mentioned those earlier. I'm sorry." "It's okay," Lynn said, though it wasn't really. "Can I use the piano now?" "Of course. I have a department meeting, but I trust you to lock up when you're done. Just pull the door closed behind you. It locks automatically." Ms. Rivera handed Lynn a small set of keys. The outside door will be locked at 5, so make sure you leave before then or you'll set off the alarm." When Ms. Rivera left, Lynn set her backpack aside and sat at the piano. She took a deep breath, centering herself, then began to play. The opening notes of her composition flowed from memory, soft, questioning, like the first tentative steps into an unknown space. Then came the part she'd been struggling with, the transition from uncertainty to the first glimmers of confidence. Lynn played the passage over and over, adjusting notes, changing rhythms, searching for the right musical expression. Time slipped away as she worked, lost in the process of creation. The piece was beginning to take shape, not just a collection of pretty melodies, but a true emotional narrative. She was so absorbed that she didn't hear the door open. It wasn't until a voice spoke that she realized she wasn't alone. "So this is what you're playing for the talent show?" Lynn's hands jerked away from the keys. "Tyler, again. What are you doing here?" she asked, immediately on guard. "Detention," he said simply. "Mr. Peterson had me organizing the instrument storage room next door." "I heard someone playing." Lynn said nothing, wishing he would leave. Instead, she heard his footsteps coming closer. "That didn't sound like normal classical stuff," Tyler continued. "It's yours, right? You wrote it?" Lynn nodded reluctantly. "It's different," he said. In a good way. The compliment caught her off guard. She waited for the joke, the punchline, the moment when his real intention would become clear. But Tyler just leaned against the piano, seemingly in no hurry to leave. "Why are you being nice to me?" Lynn finally asked bluntly. Tyler was quiet for a moment. "I'm not always a jerk, you know." "Could have fooled me," Lynn muttered. To her surprise, Tyler laughed. "Yeah, I deserve that." His voice grew more serious. "Look, I've been thinking about what you're doing, entering the talent show and all. It takes guts. Or stupidity," Lynn said. "Maybe both," Tyler agreed. "But either way, it's impressive." Lynn's fingers rested lightly on the keys, not playing, just feeling their smooth surface beneath her fingertips. "Brittany doesn't think so. I heard her telling people it's going to be a disaster." Tyler sighed. "Brittany can be harsh. We've been together since freshman year, and sometimes I don't even know why anymore." The confession hung in the air between them. Lynn had no idea how to respond. This conversation was veering into territory she hadn't expected. "Anyway," Tyler said, clearing his throat, "your piece is good, really good. But the middle section needs something, like a stronger melody line over those chord progressions." Lynn blinked in surprise. "You know about music theory?" "I've played guitar since I was 8, Tyler said, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "My dad's a session musician in Nashville. I grew up with this stuff." "Oh." It was hard for Lynn to reconcile this version of Tyler, someone who understood music, who could offer legitimate criticism of her composition, with the boy who had laughed at her on her first day of school. "Try adding a counter melody here," Tyler suggested, and Lynn heard him tap the music rack above the keyboard. "When you do that minor chord progression." Lynn hesitated, then placed her hands back on the keys and played the section he was talking about. "You mean here?" "Yeah. It feels like it's building to something, but then it just repeats. Like it needs a payoff." Lynn considered this, then tried a variation with a new melodic line weaving through the chords. It worked surprisingly well. "That's it," Tyler said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. That's exactly what it needed. Lynn played it through again, making small adjustments. The section did sound better, more complete, more emotionally satisfying. "Thanks," she said reluctantly. "No problem." There was an awkward pause. "I should go. Peterson will think I escaped." "Yeah?" Lynn nodded, still somewhat bewildered by the entire interaction. Tyler's footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. "By the way, the auditions aren't that big a deal. The committee just wants to make sure you're not going to embarrass yourself on stage. Play like you just did, and you'll be fine." The door closed behind him before Lynn could respond. The following days fell into an intense routine. Lynn attended classes, worked on homework, and spent every spare minute practicing her composition. She arrived at school early each morning to use the piano before classes started. She stayed late every afternoon, working through difficult passages, polishing transitions, strengthening the emotional arc of the piece. Raj and Zoe took turns staying with her after school, sometimes offering feedback, sometimes just providing silent company. Ms. Rivera helped too, suggesting minor adjustments to improve the flow. Even Tyler stopped by occasionally, usually when Lynn was alone, offering brief but insightful comments about the musical structure. These strange, furtive interactions remained their secret. During school hours, Tyler still sat with Brittany and her friends, though he no longer joined in when they made jokes at Lynn's expense. The night before the auditions, Lynn could barely sleep. She played the piece in her mind over and over, imagining her fingers on the keys, hearing each note and phrase in her head. By morning, she was exhausted but oddly calm. Whatever happened at the auditions, she knew she had created something meaningful. When the final bell rang that Friday, Lynn made her way to the auditorium, her cane tapping steadily against the floor. Ms. Rivera met her at the entrance. "The committee is ready for you," she said. "They've been watching video auditions all afternoon, but you're the first live performer." Lynn nodded, suddenly unable to speak. Her mouth felt dry and her heart was racing. "Lynn, listen to me," Ms. Rivera said gently. "No matter what happens today, what you've created is beautiful. Remember that." Lynn took a deep breath and followed Ms. Rivera into the auditorium. The space felt enormous. She could sense its vastness by the way sounds echoed. Ms. Rivera led her to the grand piano on stage, larger than the one in the music room. Its keys slightly wider, its action a bit heavier. "Whenever you're ready," a man's voice called from somewhere in the audience. "Principal Winters," Lynn guessed. Lynn positioned herself at the piano, took another steadying breath and began to play. The opening notes filled the auditorium, clear and precise. As she moved deeper into the piece, the world around her faded away. There was only the music, flowing from her heart through her fingers to the keys. When the final note faded, there was silence. Lynn sat still, hands resting in her lap, waiting. Then, from the darkness beyond the stage, she heard it. Applause. Not just polite clapping, but enthusiastic, genuine applause. "That was extraordinary," Principal Winters said, his voice closer now. "Did you compose that yourself?" Lynn nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Well, I think I speak for the entire committee when I say we would be honored to have you perform in the talent show." More applause followed his words. Lynn felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but they were tears of relief and joy. As Ms. Rivera helped her from the stage, Lynn heard someone whisper, "That blind girl is going to steal the show." For once, being called that blind girl didn't bother her at all. The official talent show lineup was posted on Monday morning. Lynn couldn't see it, of course, but she didn't need to. The buzz in the hallway told her everything. Her name was on the list along with 14 others selected from the original 23 who had auditioned. "You're number 12, Raj told her as they walked to first period, right before the dance team and after Devin's stand-up comedy. 12th out of 15. Lynn frowned. "That's near the end." "That's good," Zoe chimed in, falling into step beside them. "They always put the best acts toward the end. It's like saving dessert for last." Lynn wasn't convinced, but she appreciated her friend's enthusiasm. Over the past few weeks, Raj and Zoe had become fixtures in her life, sitting with her at lunch, walking with her between classes, describing things she couldn't see. It still surprised her sometimes how quickly they had adopted her into their small circle. Guess who didn't make the cut? Zoe's voice dropped to a gleeful whisper. Brittany's singing group. Apparently their harmony was so off-key that Mrs. Patel actually winced during their audition. "Zoe," Raj scolded, but Lynn could hear the amusement in his voice. "What?" Zoe defended herself. "After how she's treated Lynn, I'm allowed to enjoy a little karmic justice." Lynn said nothing, but a small, guilty part of her couldn't help feeling satisfied. Brittany had been the ringleader of her tormentors since day one. The idea that she had failed where Lynn had succeeded felt like balancing the scales just a little. That satisfaction was short-lived, however. By lunchtime, Lynn could sense a shift in the atmosphere. As she made her way through the cafeteria, cane tapping steadily in front of her, the usual background noise dipped in a way that told her people were watching, whispering. "Don't look now," Raj muttered as Lynn sat down at their table. "But Brittany is giving you the death glare from across the room. That would be more helpful information for someone who can actually see death glares," Lynn pointed out dryly. "Sorry," Raj said. "But seriously, she looks furious. Tyler's trying to calm her down, but she's not having it. She's just jealous because you got into the show and she didn't," Zoe said, opening her lunch bag. "Ignore her." Lynn tried to follow that advice, but it became increasingly difficult over the next few days. Brittany's hostility moved from silent glares to more active forms of sabotage. On Wednesday, Lynn found her locker jammed. On Thursday, someone accidentally spilled soda on her backpack in the cafeteria. And on Friday, her cane mysteriously disappeared from where she had propped it against the wall during gym class, leaving her stranded until the teacher helped her search for it. They eventually found it in the janitor's closet on the opposite side of the gymnasium. "This isn't just happening by chance, is it?" Lynn asked Zoe as they walked to the bus after school. Zoe hesitated before answering. "No," she admitted finally. "Brittany's been pretty open about being out to get you. She thinks you somehow stole her spot in the talent show." "That's ridiculous," Lynn said. "We weren't even doing the same type of act." "Yeah, well, logic isn't exactly Brittany's strong suit," Zoe sighed. "Just be careful, okay?" "She's got a mean streak." Lynn nodded, though a knot of worry had formed in her stomach. The talent show was only a week away. She couldn't afford distractions now, not when she still had work to do on her piece. That weekend, Lynn practiced for hours at home on her keyboard. It wasn't the same as the grand piano at school, but it allowed her to refine certain passages, to work on the precise timing and emotional expression she wanted to convey. Her parents moved quietly around the house, bringing her snacks and water, knowing better than to interrupt when she was deep in her musical world. On Sunday evening, her father knocked gently on her bedroom door. "Lynn, can I come in?" "Sure, Dad." She heard him enter and sit on the edge of her bed. Her father was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his voice always carried a gentle wisdom. "Your mother and I have been listening to you practice," he said. "The piece sounds beautiful." "Thanks," Lynn replied, turning away from her keyboard. "It's getting there. Are you nervous about the show?" Lynn considered the question. "Yes," she admitted. "But not about playing. More about everything else." Her father was quiet for a moment, and Lynn could picture him nodding thoughtfully as he always did when considering his words. "When I first came to this country," he said finally, "I was just a little older than you are now. I didn't speak the language well. People made fun of my accent, my clothes, the food I brought for lunch. Some days I wanted to disappear." Lynn listened, surprised. Her father rarely talked about those early years after immigrating. "What did you do?" she asked. "I found my voice," he said simply. "Not in English, that took longer, but in mathematics. Numbers were the same in any language, and I was good with them. When I solved problems no one else could, the same people who had laughed at me started to see me differently." He reached out and took her hand. "Your music is your voice, Lynn. When you play next week, you won't just be performing, you'll be speaking in a language everyone can understand. And they will hear you." Lynn squeezed her father's hand, throat tight with emotion. "I hope so." Monday morning brought new challenges. As Lynn entered her first period class, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The usual morning chatter died down too quickly, and she could feel eyes on her as she made her way to her desk. "What's going on?" she whispered to Raj when he slipped into the seat beside her. Raj hesitated. "Someone put up posters," he said finally, keeping his voice low. "They're all over the school." "Posters about what?" "About you." Raj's voice was tight with anger. "They're advertising the talent show, but they've made it into a joke. Like people should come to laugh at the blind girl trying to play piano." Lynn felt as if all the air had been squeezed from her lungs. "Who did it?" "Who do you think?" Raj replied bitterly. "Brittany and her crew. The principal's having them taken down, but everyone's already seen them." Throughout the day, Lynn heard the whispers, felt the stares. Some people were openly discussing the posters, debating whether they were funny or cruel. Others awkwardly avoided speaking to her altogether. By the time the final bell rang, Lynn felt drained, humiliated, and suddenly unsure of everything. Instead of heading to the music room as she'd planned, she made her way to the front entrance, intending to catch the bus home. She couldn't face practicing today. Couldn't bear to sit at the piano knowing that her performance had been turned into an anticipated spectacle of failure. "Running away?" Tyler's voice caught her by surprise. He was leaning against the wall near the exit, apparently waiting for her. "I'm not running away," Lynn said defensively. "I just don't feel like practicing today." "Because of the posters?" "You saw them?" Of course he had. Everyone had. I helped take them down, Tyler said, pushing off from the wall to walk beside her. "I had nothing to do with putting them up, if that's what you're thinking." "But your girlfriend did," Lynn pointed out. Tyler was silent for a moment. "Ex-girlfriend," he said finally. Lynn stopped walking. "What?" "We broke up this morning," Tyler explained, his voice carefully neutral. After I found out what she did, Lynn didn't know what to say. The idea that Tyler had ended his relationship with Brittany over the posters, over her, was too much to process. Look, Tyler continued, Brittany did this because she's scared. Of me? Lynn couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. Of what you represent, Tyler clarified. Someone who's genuinely talented, who works hard, who doesn't need to put others down to feel important. She saw your audition video. There was a video? This was news to Lynn. The committee records all the auditions. Brittany's cousin is on the tech crew, he showed it to her. And when she saw you play, Tyler paused. Let's just say she realized you're the real deal. And it terrified her. Lynn stood still, her cane gripped tightly in one hand, trying to absorb this information. So, Tyler said after a moment, are you going to let her win? Or are you going to the music room to practice for the show that's happening in exactly 4 days, whether you're ready or not? Put that way, the choice seemed obvious. Lynn turned away from the exit and back toward the hallway leading to the music department. That's what I thought, Tyler said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The next few days passed in a blur of final preparations. Lynn practiced relentlessly, refining every note, every transition, every emotional nuance of her piece. Ms. Rivera arranged for her to rehearse once on the auditorium's grand piano. To get a feel for the space and the acoustics, Raj and Zoe took turns running interference, making sure Brittany and her friends stayed far away, and Tyler, to everyone's surprise, became Lynn's unofficial bodyguard, walking her between classes, sitting with her at lunch, though at a separate table from Raj and Zoe, who remained suspicious of his sudden change of allegiance, and offering steady encouragement during practice sessions. The night before the talent show, Lynn's mother knocked on her door well past midnight. You should be sleeping, she said gently. I can't, Lynn admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I imagine 1,000 people laughing when I sit down at the piano. Her mother sat beside her on the bed. Do you remember when you were 7 and you had your first piano recital? Lynn nodded. I was so scared I threw up backstage. Yes, her mother laughed softly. But then you walked out, sat down at that piano, and played so beautifully that Mrs. Dvorak asked if you'd consider advanced lessons. I remember, Lynn said. Tomorrow might be scary, her mother acknowledged, but the music is still yours. No one can take that away from you no matter what happens. Lynn leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. Thanks, Mom. Now sleep, her mother insisted. Tomorrow will be here soon enough. The day of the talent show dawned bright and clear. Lynn went through her classes in a daze, barely hearing the lessons, responding mechanically when called on. The butterflies in her stomach had grown into eagles, their wings beating against her ribcage with every passing hour. By the time she arrived at the auditorium for the pre-show check-in, Lynn felt like she might actually be sick, just as she had been all those years ago at her first recital. Hey. Tyler appeared at her side, a steadying presence. Breathe, okay? Just breathe. Lynn nodded, trying to slow her racing heart. They're checking the piano now, he told her, making sure it's perfectly tuned. I made them do it twice. Despite her nerves, Lynn smiled. Thanks, Lynn? Ms. Rivera's voice called from nearby. We need all performers in the green room. The show starts in 20 minutes. Go on, Tyler said. I'll be right in the front row. With Raj and Zoe? Lynn asked. There was a pause, then Tyler laughed. Yeah, with Raj and Zoe. We've called a truce for tonight. For you. Lynn reached out impulsively and found his arm, giving it a quick squeeze. Thank you. For everything. As Ms. Rivera led her backstage, Lynn could hear the auditorium filling up. Hundreds of voices, the scraping of chairs, laughter, and anticipation building. The talent show was the biggest event of the fall semester, drawing not just students and teachers but parents and alumni as well. Somewhere out there, her parents were finding their seats. Somewhere out there, Brittany was probably hoping for Lynn to fail spectacularly, and somewhere in the front row, 3 unlikely friends were waiting to cheer her on. Lynn took another deep breath. Win or lose, humiliation or triumph, in just a few hours it would all be over. All she had to do was play her piece. The music that had become her voice, her heart, her way of speaking to a world that often refused to truly see her. She could do that. One note at a time. The green room buzzed with nervous energy. 14 performers paced, practiced, adjusted costumes, and whispered encouragement to each other. Lynn sat quietly in a corner, fingers moving silently through the motions of her piece, playing on an imaginary keyboard. 5 minutes until curtain, the student stage manager called out. Act 1, get ready. Lynn listened as the first performer, a freshman boy with a guitar, was led to the wings. She could hear his rapid breathing, the squeak of his shoes as he shifted his weight from foot to foot. You'll be amazing, someone told him, and then the murmur of the audience outside grew louder as the main doors opened. Principal Winters's voice boomed through the speakers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Westlake High's annual Winter Talent Showcase. Applause thundered through the walls. Lynn felt it vibrate in her chest, matching the rhythm of her pounding heart. The show had begun. One by one, the performers left the green room and returned. Some came back elated, riding the high of audience approval. Others slunk back dejected, whispering about forgotten lyrics or fumbled dance steps. Lynn listened to it all, counting down the acts, feeling time simultaneously stretch and compress. Act 11, you're up next. The stage manager called. That was Devin with his stand-up comedy routine. Lynn would be after him. She rose from her chair, smoothing down her dark blue dress, the one her mother had helped her pick out specially for tonight. Not that Lynn could see it, but her mother had described it in loving detail. Midnight blue with tiny silver threads woven through that caught the light when she moved, like stars in a night sky. You look beautiful, her mother had told her. Like a pianist should look, elegant but not flashy. The music will be the star. Now, as Lynn moved toward the stage door, she felt a hand on her arm. That's a nice dress, Ms. Rivera said beside her. Are you ready? Lynn nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They could hear Devin on stage, his joke landing with a wave of laughter from the audience. He was good, really good. And Lynn wondered how she was supposed to follow comedy with her serious, emotional piano piece. Don't worry, Ms. Rivera said, as if reading her thoughts. The contrast will work in your favor. After laughter, people are open, receptive to feeling other emotions. Devin's act ended with enthusiastic applause. He bounded off stage grinning. They're all yours, he whispered as he passed Lynn. Knock 'em dead. Act 12, the stage manager announced. Lynn Wong, piano. Ms. Rivera guided Lynn to the stage entrance. I'll walk you to the piano, she said. Just like we practiced. Lynn took a deep breath and stepped out onto the stage. The immediate hush that fell over the auditorium told her that the audience had spotted her white cane. She could almost feel hundreds of eyes watching as Ms. Rivera led her to the grand piano center stage. As they walked, Lynn caught the murmur of whispers from the audience. One voice, louder than the rest, Brittany's she was certain, said clearly, "This should be entertaining." A few nervous laughs followed. Lynn's stomach clenched, but she kept moving forward, counting steps in her head. 17 from the wing to the piano, then 3 more to the bench. Ms. Rivera guided Lynn's hand to the edge of the piano, then to the bench. It's all yours, she whispered before stepping away. Lynn sat down, adjusting her position carefully, making sure she was centered. She reached for the keys, finding middle C by touch, then letting her fingers rest lightly on the cool ivory. The auditorium was completely silent now, waiting. For a terrible moment, Lynn froze. She couldn't remember the opening notes of her piece. Her mind went blank, fingers suddenly leaden on the keys. Panic rose in her throat. Then from the front row came the softest sound, a deliberate cough that Lynn recognized immediately as Raj's. It was their signal, something they'd worked out during rehearsals. If she froze, he'd cough once to break the spell. It worked. The first notes came back to her and Lynn began to play. The opening was delicate, questioning. Single notes picked out carefully like first steps in darkness. Lynn let the initial melody unfold slowly, drawing the audience in. This part of the piece expressed uncertainty, the feeling of being lost in a world not designed for you. As the left hand joined with gentle chords, the music began to build. Lynn's fingers moved more confidently now, finding the rhythm that lived in her bones. The piece shifted into its second movement, faster, more complex, with occasional discordant notes representing obstacles, challenges, harsh words. She was dimly aware of the absolute silence in the auditorium. No coughing, no shuffling, no whispers, just her music filling every corner of the space. The middle section arrived, the part she and Tyler had worked on together, where the counter melody wove through the chord progressions, creating something richer and more nuanced than either part alone. It represented connection, unexpected friendship, the discovery that darkness could contain beauty if you learned to listen differently. Lynn leaned into the music now, her body swaying slightly as the emotional core of the piece emerged. Her fingers danced across the keys with impossible precision, building complex harmonies that seemed too intricate for a single performer. In the audience, someone gasped audibly. Lynn didn't hear it. She had entered that special space where nothing existed except the music, not the audience, not her fears, not even her physical self. There was only sound and emotion perfectly entwined. The final movement began, the triumph, the transformation. The melody soared, backed by thundering chords that made the piano vibrate beneath her fingers. This was the part she had worked hardest on, technically challenging runs that required both speed and delicacy. Dynamic shifts from whisper-soft to room-filling power. Lynn poured everything into these final minutes. All the frustration of being underestimated, all the hurt from cruel words, all the determination that had carried her through each day, but also the joy of true friendship, the comfort of family support, and the pure love of music that had been her constant companion. As she approached the final measures, Lynn felt tears on her cheeks, though she hadn't realized she was crying. The last notes hung in the air, a resolution that wasn't simplistic happiness but something more complex. Acceptance, strength and hope intertwined, then silence. For a heartbeat, the room remained absolutely still. Lynn sat frozen at the piano, hands still positioned over the final chord, afraid to move and break the spell. The applause, when it came, didn't build gradually. It exploded, a wall of sound so sudden and intense that Lynn flinched. Then came the cheers, the whistles, and finally the sound of hundreds of people rising to their feet. A standing ovation. Lynn remained seated, overwhelmed. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope for it. Tears flowed freely now as the applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. Footsteps approached, and Ms. Rivera's hand touched her shoulder. "You did it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Lynn, they're all standing. Every single person in this auditorium is on their feet for you." Lynn stood shakily, turning toward the audience. The roar intensified. Someone was chanting her name, and others joined in. She bowed deeply in the direction of the sound, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. As Ms. Rivera led her off stage, the applause still thundering behind them, Lynn passed a small group waiting in the wings. She couldn't see them, but she knew who they were. The next acts, including the dance team that was supposed to follow her performance. "How are we supposed to follow that?" one of the dancers whispered, awe in her voice. In the green room, Lynn was immediately surrounded. Performers who had barely spoken to her before crowded close, offering congratulations, asking questions about her composition, expressing amazement at her talent. Then the door burst open, and 3 people pushed through the crowd. Raj, Zoe and Tyler. "You were incredible," Zoe said, throwing her arms around Lynn. "I told you," Raj added, his voice suspiciously wobbly. "I knew you'd blow them away." Tyler was quieter. "The counter melody worked," he said simply, and Lynn smiled, knowing what that understated comment meant coming from him. The rest of the show continued, but Lynn barely registered it. She sat in the audience with her friends for the final acts, though the performers seemed to be going through the motions, knowing they couldn't match what had come before. When Principal Winters returned to the stage to announce the winner, because though they called it a showcase, there were always judges and a prize, Lynn held her breath along with everyone else. This year's decision was perhaps the easiest in Westlake talent show history. Principal Winters said, "The winner of the 2023 Winter Talent Showcase with an original piano composition is Lynn Wong." The auditorium erupted again. Lynn made her way back to the stage, guided by Raj, accepting the small trophy with shaking hands. "Would you like to say a few words?" Principal Winters asked. Lynn nodded, stepping to the microphone. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "When I first came to Westlake, I felt invisible in a way that had nothing to do with being blind. But through music, I found my voice. And tonight you listened. That means more than any trophy." She paused, then added, "Someone wise recently told me that music is a language everyone can understand. I'm grateful to everyone who helped me speak it tonight. My teachers, my family, my friends, and yes, even those who doubted me. Sometimes we need to hear laughter before we find the courage to create something worth applauding." As Lynn left the stage amid renewed cheers, she passed a small group standing in the wings. She didn't need sight to know Brittany was among them. She could smell the familiar perfume. "That was amazing," Brittany said quietly, stopping Lynn with a hand on her arm. "I was wrong about you. I'm sorry." Lynn stood still, surprised by the genuine remorse in Brittany's voice. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means something." Outside the auditorium, Lynn's parents waited, bursting with pride. Her father wrapped her in a tight hug. "You found your voice," he whispered. And everyone heard it. Over his shoulder, Lynn could hear Raj, Zoe, and Tyler talking excitedly about a celebration dinner. Ms. Rivera was telling another teacher about Lynn's incredible ear and composition skills. Students who had never spoken to her were calling out congratulations as they passed. Lynn held her trophy, feeling its weight and shape, the tangible proof of what she had accomplished. But it wasn't the trophy that mattered most. What mattered was the moment when the laughter had stopped, when the music had begun, when her hands had moved, and the room had moved with them.